I want to start with a quick agenda. So there's two things on my agenda. One is, and let's see, let me just get there. Here we go. All right, communication. It's all about sending and receiving signals. And as this couple clearly represents, they kind of are a little not quite getting the idea of how to use this tool to communicate. All right, so the first thing I'd love to know is, what do you all want to know? Why did you come to this class today? What are you hoping to get out of it? And then I brought a few topics that are dear to my heart that I want to speak about, thinking about what the purpose of feedback is, practicing how to do it. A lot of my work is around performance and how do you increase and practice and develop better performance. And then I have a feedback checklist that I want to share with you. And if we have time, we'll get into some common mistakes. Okay, so let's see. So let's go right in and tell me, let me just click on this little arrow thing here. So your turn. Tell me, what do you most want to know about giving and receiving feedback? And what you answer will help me tailor what I brought to what you guys need to know. Because if what I brought isn't what you need to know, I'm going to go through it really fast and leave it open for questions. Okay, so let's see. We've got Lawrence saying, better skills for giving feedback. Great. Lawrence, with skills, do you mean you don't know what to say, or what's the missing skill? Do you have a sense of what you're missing, or you don't even know where to start? Let's see. So Lawrence, let me know. Great. Lawrence says, how to give feedback that does not irritate the recipient. It's a tough one, and it's a good one, and it's doable. And it is doable. Let's see. Jenny says, how to summon the courage. Okay, so not irritate, how to have courage. Edgar says, handling conflicting feedback. Edgar, do you mean two different things? Let's see. Actually, Bob, can you make the chat window larger so that I won't lose all the conversation? Okay, so courage, conflicting feedback. Test says how to receive constructive feedback in a way your boss appreciates. Great, great. So receiving it graciously. Arturo says best practices in giving feedback. How is feedback best received? Ooh, thank you, Bob. That really helps. How is feedback best received? That's a great question. You know, I think best received, communication is a bit of a personal thing. So what really works with one person may not work with another. So I'll try to give you some frameworks to help manage that sort of thing. Andy says, giving feedback to your own manager and other execs. That's great. So that's part of our whole process of managing up. How do we get that? Also, not only the team that we have authority and responsibility for, give them feedback, but how do we give feedback to people that we report to? Let's see, that was Andy. Yes, thank you, Edgar, for confirming that. Kathleen says, my team is all remote. Oh, any tips for giving feedback over the phone or not face-to-face? Great, that's a great one. We can talk about that a little bit on phone, face-to-face. Yeah, it's always nice to do it face-to-face, but it's not always possible. How to give feedback when an employee is not receptive. I'm going to answer that one right away. When an employee is not receptive to feedback, what you do is you give them feedback on how they take feedback. Let me say that again. When an employee is not receptive to feedback, give them feedback on how they take feedback. And that is the way you can open the door with them. And it's hard. It's hard, but you need to be persistent. Let's see. Sudhir says, how can we make giving and receiving feedback to be a positive experience for both parties? I wish we were in the same room so I could ask you back that question and ask you, what do you think? But I want to assure you that I truly believe that feedback is a very positive thing. It's very hard, and it's a very useful tool. I actually really welcome feedback, and I always encourage people to keep themselves open to receive it because it's a great way to grow. All right, let's see. Teresa says she most struggles with addressing negative behavior that the recipient disagrees with. Yeah, this is great. And this goes into Teresa, that goes into separating the behavior from kind of negative emotion judgment and finding a way to describe it factually. And the challenge with that is you have to get people to get their guard down enough that they're comfortable to create with you and talk about what are we trying to solve here instead of being like, get defensive. So that might be something to really, that we'll try to talk about a bit is like what do you do with defensive people? Okay, let's see. Gerardo, how to communicate that a feedback session is needed. That's an interesting one. Okay. That a feedback session is needed, just say it. I mean, I guess it depends who you're going to. If it's someone you normally have conversations with, you can take them aside and just say, hey, I have something I want to share with you. And something that I want to say right now is all of you are already bringing in this sense of dealing with people get irritated or defensive. One of the important things about giving feedback is being sensitive to choosing the right time and place to give it. So finding a time in private, finding a time when you and that person are not under tremendous pressure. For example, I was talking with a client who was really, really urgently needing to ask his manager something, and his manager was in the middle of a fire drill of company-wide proportions. And I said to my client, I said, I understand that you need to say this to your manager and get information from him. When would be a good time, recognizing that he's in the middle of this crisis, when could you find a window of opportunity to ask him for his undivided attention? So that can be part of it, is like looking at the time and when you say something. Okay, let's see. Let's just do a few more. Where was I? Needed. Different tools by which we can give feedback. Yes, we'll talk about that. B, we'll talk about different tools. And there are a ton of tools out there, and it's a bit depending on what tools you need to help up your game. Edgar says, turn feedback into actionable tasks, tracking and managing. Yes, that is the last step of the feedback process that I want to take you guys through. Ying Ying Su, how to give negative feedbacks and to subordinates and teammates. The first thing I'll say with that, Ying Ying, is take away the word negative. What's the purpose of the feedback? You want to help them get better. So how might you frame it when you give them information that you're doing it not because you think they're bad, but you're doing it because you want them to get better? And one of the things I'll talk about over and over is the relationship you have with the person and how they need to trust you. You need to demonstrate that you care for them and you're doing this as a way to help them and to help the work of the team in your organization. So we'll get into that a little bit more. Hillary says, how to give feedback when an employee is not receptive. Okay, we talked about that, Lawrence. How do we give feedback to a superior when you know the topic will be a challenge? Absolutely. That's such a great question. And I'm sure there's a lot of wisdom in this group to talk about that. We'll talk about that a little bit because all feedback can be challenging. A lot of it is about coming to consensus and starting with a sense of we're working together to solve a problem. And Sudhir says feed forward instead of feedback. What is feed forward, Sudhir? Let's see, is that giving feedback to people before they need it, like giving positive reinforcement of things people have done well, which is a great technique that I highly recommend. It's about looking at the future instead of the past. Okay. Let's hold that one, Sudhir. And when we get towards the end and we have some Q&A, maybe you can come back in and help me understand what would help you. All right, so we heard a lot of different things. We've heard not irritating people. We heard about having the courage to say something. We heard about how do you give feedback to people above you? How do you, especially when it might be a challenge? We also heard about when people get defensive. For example, especially people in particular who aren't receptive to feedback. Somebody said, how can we make feedback a positive, energizing thing? And at the very beginning, it was Kathy who talked about feedback being essential. Oh, great. A link for later for all of us. HR bartender. Goodsmith fell feed forward. Feed forward is more pertinent to performance and evaluations for future goals and metrics. Great. I will look into that and find out more about that. I love new tools. Keep them coming. Keep sharing them with me. All right. So I think we've got a really good sense of what you guys want to talk about. I'm going to give you some information that, let me just go back to the agenda for a second. So we just did number 1. I'm going to go over the purpose of feedback as I see it. We're going to do together, each one of you at home or at your office is going to do a practice of how to prepare for a session. And then I'm going to give you a checklist of here's the whole process to help you have something to leverage. You can walk right away with that and go, okay, I know feedback is hard, but if I run down this checklist, I'm 80% there right away. And then a few common mistakes, if we have time to get to that. And then we'll have some Q&A and time for you guys to share with me what worked about this session and what would be an upgrade for next time. All right, so because I can't hear you and I can't see you, I'm going to assume that you are awesomely happy. And I'm going to invite you throughout this whole conversation. The chat box is always there. When you have a question or a comment, please post it in the chat box and I will work to address that either in the moment or when we get to the end of the session. All righty? Great. Here we go. Okay, so why feedback? And a lot of you spoke to this already, but I just want to share a quick anecdote. Last Thanksgiving, my husband and I were having this huge party, and our refrigerator decided to go out. And so food is spoiling. The freezer was still working, but food was spoiling, and we had like 30 people coming over to our house. It was very stressful. Now, what did we do? Did we go, I don't want to say anything. I might hurt the fridge's feelings. No, we didn't do that. We said, okay, what's the problem? Let's fix it. Let's move on. So before we start, what I want to do is set a definition of what is feedback. Imagine you're in your car and you're driving along, and here's a picture of a speedometer. This is in kilometers, which is why it's 134 right now, which is still pretty fast. But you're in your car and you press your foot on the gas pedal. When you press your foot on the gas pedal, it sends a signal to the engine to inject fuel into the engine to make the engine go faster. Then the car goes faster, and then the speedometer adjusts to where you are, and then you lighten your touch on the pedal or you press down a little more in order to adjust to the feedback signal you're getting from the car, from the speedometer, to get to where you want to be. So what's happening here is, in this case with the car, the feedback is a signal that you're getting. There are constant adjustments happening so that you can stay at that performance level you want to be at, whether it's 134 or whether it's 45. But you're constantly putting input in, pressure on the pedal, and then you're getting input of looking at the screen and what's working. So the way I like to define feedback is a signal which is neutral. It's neither good nor bad. It's not, oh, my refrigerator is bad because it broke. It's not, oh, my car is not going fast enough, slow enough, that's good or bad. That's just fast or slow. That's just, I want to get it to this place. So think of feedback as a signal, which is neutral. It's consistent. You're always course correcting. You're always course correcting. You're always course correcting. And it's necessary. My husband had this thing a few years ago where the speedometer on his car broke. And so it said 0 all the time. And I borrowed his car one day and it was really confusing because I like to drive a little fast. So I'm always watching the speedometer to make sure I'm in the safety zone. And there was no feedback to tell me how fast I was going. The only feedback I could use was watching the cars around me. Okay, I'm just reading, catching up on the chat. You guys are talking about feed forward. Thank you for that information. Feed forward is about getting an employee to improve, not feel bad about something that cannot be fixed. So a lot more effective way of getting to people perform more effectively. Awesome, absolutely. I'm going to interrupt myself right here or actually I'm going to additive. So building on what Sudhir said and building what I said, feedback is a signal. And the most effective way to give feedback is to be able to separate it from the emotion. You guys talked about people being defensive, challenging, irritated, shutting down, all these kinds of things. I like to say that's the emotion. And I want to add in one thing here about the importance of emotion. And Sudhir's point and Edgar's point really speaks to this, which is Google did this project for about 3 years of gathering data and putting out the hypothesis, trying to determine within their organization what makes the best, most effective team. And you may have seen this, it was written about in the New York Times a few months ago. And they kept on testing, like, what makes a team most successful? Is it having super smart people? Is it the type of work they're doing? Is it how much people talk? Is it how little people talk? They tested these hypotheses over and over and over again. And eventually what they came to was that the number one thing, they came up with 5 things that teams need, but the number one thing, table stakes, that teams need to really operate at a high level is what is called psychological safety. I need to feel safe at work, and everyone needs to feel safe at work. And what the concept of psychological safety is that when you feel safe, you are willing to take risks, you are willing to disagree with people in order to challenge and bring the best ideas forward, and you're able to collaborate. So this is very much the place where I come from. One, that feedback is a tool to help people get better, feel better, be more engaged, be more powerful. And you have to recognize that there is emotion there and how can you create psychological safety. And that might be for them or it might be for yourself. All right, so speaking of psychological safety, whenever I teach, I always talk about what's your comfort zone and what's your stretch zone. Yes, Sudhir, that is exactly it. You can look at that. There's also a really great write-up in the New York Times by Charles Duhigg, who's this man who's written The Power of Habit, which is a great book on changing habits. And he has a new book out, which I'm blanking on the title of right now, but yes, exactly. Thank you, Sudhir. Resources for you guys. Okay, so now back to you. Think about you yourself. When you want to do something new, it's difficult, it's a learning kind of thing. I'd like you guys to start setting the stage for yourselves. Where is your feedback comfort zone? So a comfort zone is the stuff you do easily. Remember at the beginning where I asked people what was easier for you, giving or receiving feedback? So think about in your comfort zone, that's things that you're an expert at, things that you do as a habit. You don't have to exert a lot of effort. The neurological load is light because you've already laid down the neural pathways to be able to do this over and over and over. You practice things, they become comfort zone. Stretch zone is that place where things are new, feels a little different, it's a little shaky, unfamiliar. In order to make it work, you need to think about it because there are fewer neural pathways and they're much thinner. There might not even be any yet. Your brain might go this way one time and this way one time. And then beyond the stretch zone is the danger zone. When you do something that's so unfamiliar and scary that the fight, flight, fright kicks in and you might just shut down. So the goal as you think about feedback is, where is my feedback stretch zone? So think about it for a second, and you don't need to answer this. This is self-reflection. Here's a 2x2 grid. I want to acknowledge that this is a business school, and so we must have a 2x2 grid. And this is a really nice framework that I came out a little while ago, and I'm going to give you some info on this in a second. But this woman, Kim Scott, she looked at feedback in terms of these two scales. How deeply do you care for someone, or how impersonal you are, top to bottom? And then, do you avoid feedback, or do you challenge directly? And I think, in the middle might be honest, but don't say anything until it's a big problem, something like that. So looking at these, just decide for yourself where you might be. Like, do you really care for people so you don't say anything because you don't want to hurt their feelings, or you really have the courage to, I really care, I want them to succeed, so I'm going to tell them that this is really not working. And then on the impersonal side, there's, it's just like, I'm not going to bother. That's not my job. That guy's a jerk anyway. And then there's this impersonal challenging people where you say, oh man, I am, you blew it. Boy, you are a blowhard. That is just ridiculous. In preparing this talk, I talked with some of my fellow MBAs from Haas, and one person shared a great story of a company he worked at, and they just hired someone from France. It was a company that needed bilingual skills, and it's the opening lunch, the welcome lunch for this woman. And my friend was there at the meeting with her and her boss. And her boss at her welcome lunch said, oh, we just hired you because your visa was in place. Your work's not that good. Like, really? So, okay, you know where you are on this scale. I would say for me, like, I sometimes am in different places at different times because I think I care really personally, but sometimes I can be too challenging for people and I need to find a slower way. So where are you? And so this is from Kim Scott, who came out with this wonderful concept, radical candor, which is the red top right box. And you can see her talk if you Google radical candor. But she basically says you need to be in the top in the red box. If you're in the green box, ruinous empathy, which she calls it, where you care personally but you don't say anything, the example she gave was an employee who was really having problems, and she didn't give that person feedback, and then she had to fire him, and the person and she told him the problems at that point, and then the person said, well, why didn't you tell me? That's ruinous empathy. And then I think you can understand the other ones as well. And check out her talk. It's a really nice framework, some really great stories about giving and receiving feedback. Okay, so now you know what's comfortable for you. You've talked a little bit about your learning area. Let's move into practicing this. But before we do that, I want to take 30 seconds and ask you guys for feedback. So I'd like to know, and just in chat, what's working so far? So just, if you feel like it, is this working for you? If it's good, just say yes. Oh, 1, 2, 3 are typing. Great energy, thank you. Yeah, it's funny because I'm used to presenting where I can see people, so I have to just imagine you all. Useful, great, thank you. Working, wonderful, thank you. Okay. Very helpful and applicable, great. Okay, I know that 2x2 is fantastic. One of the things that I will constantly emphasize is there's tons of information out there, but we suffer from decision fatigue. So give yourself something simple to work with. Yeah, great. A signal and a being, yes, I do too. Thank you, Sudhir. Let's go into what would be an upgrade. Any upgrade so far? Because we still have 30 minutes or 27 minutes left, so I could change something. Oh, this suspense is killing me. And I welcome feedback. I really do. And I actually wrote this presentation for this. So this is a new presentation for me, and I didn't have a lot of time to get feedback from my community before I brought it to you. So your feedback. Technically, audio echoing. That's awkward. Teresa, if you're getting echoing, maybe try putting on a headset. Sometimes that helps. Okay, let's see. So mute your microphone. Yeah. And if you have detailed technical things, you can side chat with Kevin or Bob, and they can help you a little more specifically and say, like, press this button and that sort of thing. Definitely not my expertise. Okay, great. Any upgrades? Listeners muting mics, yeah. Great. All right, well, I welcome the feedback of upgrades. We'll continue. Great. All right, so let's move on then, and the door is open for that. Okay. Sometimes answering every question interrupts the presentation flow. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I tend to try to integrate what I'm hearing from you into the conversation, but I'm hearing that the more linear is helpful for you. Okay, so we're moving into chapter 2. Chapter 1 was what is feedback and what's your personal comfort zone around giving and receiving feedback. Now we're moving into chapter 2, which is sending your signal. So I love this picture because think of the lighthouse, this steady light in the middle of the storm, helping the ships know how to not crash on the rocks. If you ever do the walk in San Francisco, there's a beautiful walk around Land's End, and there are 3 different ships that are wrecked there on the rocks that you can see little masts poking up. So what is the signal you want to send? And we're going to do 2 things. One is I want to think about preparing the signal. One of the most crucial practices for any kind of performance cycle is how do you prepare for the performance? So if the feedback, the actual feedback of someone is the performance, how do you prepare for that? And remember, when I talked about feedback is a signal, there's these 3 characteristics. It's neutral. And I like to say hard on the problem, soft on people. Feedback is consistent. You know, it's not just you tell people once and then assume, oh, I told them they got it. I don't understand why they didn't fix it. They got it. And then it's necessary. It's something that's necessary to help improve performance. Okay, so what I'd like you guys to do now is, I love that you're solving everybody's headset problems and all those kinds of things. All right, so I'd like each of you to take out a piece of paper and write this down. If you can, write it down rather than on a computer because it goes into your brain in a different way when you're writing by hand. Think of a problem situation where you need to give somebody feedback. And then I'm going to take you through thinking through that problem, describing the problem. What are the parts of the problem? Okay, so think of a situation where someone needs feedback. Maybe it's an employee. Maybe, you know, if you want to do the more difficult one, the situation of your manager and managing up. And let's do this. Okay, it's a reflection. So first describe the facts of the problem. So what's the situation? For example, imagine you went on a presentation, you went on a big business trip, and a colleague was helping you gather materials. You open up your bag to present, and you discover that you don't have the presentation materials you were supposed to have. It was a bunch of special presentations you were going to bring, and this person screwed up. You get there, and now you're totally flying by the seat of your pants. And it's like you're so pissed. So this is the problem. So now let's break it into hard on the problem, soft on people. So the facts of the problem. You got to this meeting counting on the other person, and they didn't, something went wrong. Maybe it was miscommunication. Maybe they messed up. Maybe, was it malicious? Did they intentionally sabotage you? Really, I doubt it. So what does back on course look like? It might be communicating with them about the problem, about the situation, and trying to figure out what went wrong so this doesn't happen again. And you could say, don't ever do this again. And they'll say, oh no, I won't. And it's like, really, did that help? The confidence that it will actually change is a little low on that one. And then any feelings you need to acknowledge. So I'm going to be quiet for a minute and just let you think about these things. See if you can describe the facts. What would an outsider be able to see when you're looking at this situation? Great, Kathy. Thank you. Yes. Yes. This is, I love it. You are um, my secret plant in the room who I didn't really plant. Yes. So this is why I think it's really important to start with self-reflection, because often we're upset or embarrassed or annoyed because something goes wrong and we think, oh, this person should fix it. It's their job. Why did they mess up? But something went wrong. And it's helpful to understand, did I have a part in this? So there's a great book called Difficult Conversations, and they talk about, what's my contribution? How did I contribute to this? So does anyone have something they'd like to share of what they wrote down? A problem they'd like to share with the group? So Edgar jumped right in, thank you. Give feedback to an employee that I did not promote. EE is a sound resource, but not ready for the next step. What is EE? Employee, thank you. Great. So wonderful. And so you're giving them feedback after the promotion cycle has ended, something like that, and you need to help them understand why they didn't get promoted. It's funny, I actually have a coaching client I'm going through this with right now. You promoted someone else, of course. So what do you want this employee to know? What signal do you want to give them? Or what is the feeling you want to acknowledge in them? And as Edgar is typing, everyone else, you can follow along, or, oh, great, yeah. Or you can keep on working on, how do you want to describe the problem and look at it of, am I hard on the problem, soft on people? Okay, so Edgar's saying the employee is the raw materials. He needs more time for growth. Great. And Edgar, are there any feelings that you need to acknowledge in yourself or the employee that you're aware of? Like maybe this employee is disappointed. Maybe the employee has expressed anger. So using Edgar's example, it's the purpose of the pre-reflection. Great. Yeah, so Kathy says, I want them to feel open to ask me questions if they don't understand the assignment. Great. Okay, so the purpose of this step is, what you're trying to do is give yourself a map of the lay of the land. Like if you think about it, it's like, oh yeah, in Edgar's case, for example, I had an open position, I promoted employee A, employee B is disappointed and bummed. How can I keep that person energized and excited while they didn't get that thing they wanted? And, what might be some of the things that we need to do? How do I get this person back on course so they're excited again? What feelings are going on? And Kathy talked about wanting the other person to feel open. So this pre-planning is like, let me expand the whole problem and really try to think critically. What is the problem? What is the mechanical system signal part of the problem? And what is the psychological safety emotional side of the problem? And then try to get a whole picture of it so that you can make a plan. Yeah, absolutely. Edgar says, letting him down. Yeah, absolutely. but need to work on facts to get to the next level. Absolutely. It's a great time. Okay, you didn't get the job. Let's talk about what you need to do. Let's build that development plan. And I'm really excited to work on that with you. And that starts a fantastic conversation and collaboration. Okay, so you've done your pre-reflection. You kind of have a sense of what the problem is. And the people part of the problem. And then let's move on to the next step, which is, I did this already a little bit in the feedback. Here, I have a 4-part script. The first part is when you go into a feedback conversation, start with what worked. This is a generic script for all feedback situations and debrief situations. The goal is to work people through, start with the connection with the people, the psychological safety, and then move into the signal of the mechanical system. What's the input that you want to change so that the output changes? And then move into collaborating with them. As Kathy says, what's my part in it? What's their part in it? How do we want to work together to move forward? And then the final step is, all right, let's book it. What's the next step on the calendar? How do we integrate what we just talked about into our workflow? Okay, so going back to your piece of paper and your situation that you're working on, like Edgar with his employee, and Kathy with helping her, letting her employee know that they can come to her and be open. Think of 1 or 2 things you want to say to this person of what worked. Start with acknowledging, for example, in Edgar's case, it might be something like, yes, you applied for that job and you demonstrated really great knowledge of our company in area such and such and so and so. You made a really great impression with how you talked about your ideas for our further service going forward. So that's acknowledging, what did that person show up with? That's the first part of helping them understand you're on their side, you care personally. You're not trying to irritate them or get them defensive. You're trying to help them. That's the first step. Then, so write that down, 1 or 2 things. The next step is, what's the upgrade? And notice this language. I didn't say what's wrong, what you did wrong. I very particularly say, what's the upgrade? And it's taken me a couple years of working with people in groups and working with other coaches like myself to decide that this is the best word. Because it goes back to what Sudhir said about forward feedback, helping people think positively and with possibility. Instead of saying, you did this wrong, you're saying, this didn't work, how are we going to fix it? So use the what's the upgrade to reestablish course. You're course correcting. You're helping getting them back on target to that big goal. So take a second or 2 and write down, what's the upgrade? And then this is the part that's the script that you probably can't prepare in advance, but you can think about, is checking for understanding. I remember, well, goes back to, I don't remember whose question it was, but the idea of what do I do when an employee is not taking feedback? Sometimes that first step is just, I'm sending a signal. What signal are you receiving? I don't know if you've ever heard this joke, but there's a joke about a captain on a ship in the middle of the night, and it's a very stormy night, and he sees a light ahead, and his ship and the other are coming towards each other, and he signals to them on the radio, change your position, shift your course. And the other light says, no, you shift your course. And the captain says, shift your course. And the other one says, no, you'll have to shift your course. And then finally the captain says, or whatever says, I'm an admiral, I say shift your course. And the other one says, I'm a lighthouse. And the point is your signal getting through? Are you sending the right signal? Are they receiving the signal that you think they're getting? The captain there on the ship assumed that light was another ship, and he was totally wrong, his assumption. So this is one of the hardest things, is making sure people actually understand what you're talking about. Okay, so think about it. In your script, working with them, check for understanding and define common direction. You know, like Edgar's wonderful example, thank you, Edgar, with his employee, acknowledging his feelings. He's disappointed, acknowledging your feelings. You you know that he's disappointed. I hear you that you're disappointed. I understand that. Of course, you're disappointed. And then, like, so what do we want to do about that? How do we want to build you and grow and invest in you? Then the final part is this what's next? So setting the steps for what's next. All right, so I'm going to start moving a little quickly because we just have about 11 minutes left. And while you have been contributing, I'm not sure that you've contributed enough. I want to make sure that this is serving you and what you want. But I want to say here, you now have a bit of a process. You have a pre-reflection. What's the situation? Let me map it out. You have a script to plan. I want to take them through these steps for the conversation. Acknowledge what worked so that I keep rapport and honor the effort that they made. And then what's the upgrade? How can we get you back on course? Checking for understanding, defining common direction, and agreeing on next steps, and then schedule it. They'll say, we'll do that, but next week at our one-on-one, let's start talking about this. Okay, now I just want to add a cherry on top, which is, remember, it's constant, it's consistent, the feedback. You may start somewhere getting to a goal. People get off course, you correct, then they're going to get off course again. You need to correct again. It's this constant oops, 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 oops. And just like your car accelerator, eventually you get where you're going, and you were probably plus or minus 2 miles away from the speed you wanted to be holding, unless you were using cruise control, of course. All right. Yay. Upgrade. Yeah, it's your words are so powerful. And that's another reason to map out in advance what you're thinking and feeling, because then if there's something like, I'm so pissed, that comes out, you can go, well, I'm not going to say that in the conversation because it's not helpful. I'm going to acknowledge for myself that I'm upset about this. Okay, great. Upgrade. Yes, the environment may change, says Lawrence, and require course correction. Great. Let's see. I'm going to skip ahead. Oh, this is not going to work. I'm going to skip ahead this way to just summarize this really quick. Hang on 1 second. Just so while you're giving feedback, you can see this. Yeah, great. Thanks, Hillary. Says a good 3-step rubric. So I put it all together into one checklist, and this is what I use all the time. And first of all, I wanted to say, start small. Don't pick the career make it or break it conversation with your CEO as your first, I'm going to do better at giving and receiving feedback conversation. You know, it could be a friend. It could be the barista at your coffee place. Start with something small. Remember, you're moving into stretch zone where things are shaky. So start small. Prepare, write down, practice. We just practiced it a little bit. You can practice saying it out loud. You can just walk yourself through it visualizing. There was a great study probably 30 years ago where they compared people shooting free throws and people imagining shooting free throws, and there was a control group who didn't practice. The control group did not improve. The people who practiced improved 24%, and the people who visualized practicing improved 22%. So don't underestimate the power of practicing just by running it through in your head. So during the session, be present with the person, focus on facts and intentions, check for understanding, find agreement for a path forward. And this is the one we didn't talk about yet. Afterwards, evaluate. You can do it with them, you can do it without them. How did you do? What worked? What's the upgrade for next time? And schedule it. So this is really the heart of everything, of getting that signal through to the person. So now I want to open it up to questions. And I thank you so much for your contributions into this conversation. I know we're just opening the door here on this, but I really invite you to take a little time and try to expand your feedback comfort zone. And I'm just going to give you these top 10 feedback misfires. Forget to say what's working, so the acknowledgement. Receive feedback and ignore it. Get defensive. Backpedal. You say something and then they freak out, and then you say, well, I really didn't mean it. It's okay. This is one we referred to, the sandwich. The challenge with giving someone praise and then constructive feedback and praise is that they don't always hear the constructive feedback because they're focused on what the last thing you said, or they start not trusting you because they're like, okay, here it comes, I'm waiting for it. Yeah, what? So that's another thing. Let's see, expecting perfection from yourself or them. You wait too long. You don't plan what to say. You know how to do that now. You're a blame thrower. Hard on the people instead of the problem. And the number one is avoiding giving feedback. Get that signal out there. All right, so a couple people said things. Let's see, upgrade. B said, from the other side, when receiving feedback, should we ask for measurable goals? Sure, if it helps you, why not? It goes back to that crafting how you want to move forward. If someone is giving you feedback to help you, let them know how they can help you. And if measurable goals is part of helping you, yes, absolutely. Edgar says, B, you should, otherwise there is no chance for upgrade. That's an interesting point. Yeah, one of the things that I only touched on lightly is this sense of continuous. How do you track that it's working? What are the systems you put into place to help that person know? I have a friend who's a coach, and he had a client who was really had a rough style at work, and he didn't understand that it was inappropriate for work, but they worked out that his coworkers would let him know whenever he was doing it, so he would get immediate feedback in the moment, and that helped him learn what he was doing. Kristen says, any tips on how to recover if you waited too long to give feedback? The longer you wait, the worse it'll get. I would say acknowledge that you waited too long. Could be something to help build trust. Is part of it. If you've waited too long, it sounds like that might be something in yourself that you're feeling as well. So maybe cutting yourself a little slack and saying, yeah, I know I did. And next time I'll be more vigilant. So I want to clean up this situation and use the knowledge of it doesn't feel so good when I wait this long for next time. So be a little gentle with yourself. Okay, Teresa says, what's the timing that you suggest? If we want to provide constructive feedback and tell them what's working, then what is the order that you recommend so as not to sandwich? So in terms of the order, I recommend what's working, what you did well. If you ask someone, how did you do? The first thing they'll do is, I didn't do very well. It's like, start to practice focusing on what's working well so that you can add on to it the upgrades. And in terms of the timing, it's a little bit subjective. One of my teachers recommended a rule of, if you have something to say to someone, do it within 24 hours. If you can't do it within 24 hours, do it within 3 days. If you can't do it within 3 days, then do it within 7 days. And that helps give me a sense of vigilance. All right, let's see. And Teresa, let me know if that didn't answer your question. I mean, the big thing about the sandwich is don't say something somewhat spacious of, I'm just tacking on something nice because I'm supposed to, so it alleviates the sting. Just rip the Band-Aid off. It's a certain amount of, you're being more generous with them when you have the courage to tell them the truth. Let's see. Oh, great. Kathy says, how to disagree with feedback in a constructive manner. That's great. Short answer, and we don't really have time for a more extensive answer, but the short answer is just your language is great. Constructive. So it sounds like dialogue. There are times when you simply do not agree with someone. And then it's a matter of what is the proper choice here? Is it, I do what they say because they're my boss? Is it we disagree on this and we need to explore more what the right path is, and let's do that together? So, but I love your language of disagreeing in a constructive manner, and that is part of the psychological safety that Google found in their work is, and actually Cameron Anderson has a wonderful talk that's also available on the Insights here, where he talks about diverse teams give better results. So you want to encourage that disagreement with people, that constructive disagreement. It actually leads to better answers. And then Dinko says, can you elaborate on number 4, Misfire, don't plan what to say? Yeah, what I mean with that, Dinko, is if you don't think about what are the really important issues, especially if emotions are high, you may get flooded yourself. You may get to the point where you lose focus on what you most want to say because of their emotion or your emotion. So having a plan and having a bit of a script, even if you don't stick to it, just to help guide you. So Kevin, I'm just going to check with you. We have how much time left? We have 1 minute left. Can we keep the line open for another minute or two? Okay, let's do that. So we did the checklist. You'll be able to get the deck and a recording of this. We talked Q&A. So I want to thank you all for coming so much. This is a topic, as you can tell, I'm really passionate about. There are many times in my life when I haven't gotten feedback and wished I had. Probably the most life-threatening one at the time, not life-threatening, but pivotal, was when I was a senior in high school and going to my prom, and I wore a beautiful dress that had a heart-shaped top, and one half of the top fell down, so I was rather exposed, shall we say, and nobody I was with told me because they were so embarrassed. So give people the gift of feedback. Thank you so much. We'll hang out for a few more minutes if anyone has other questions. If you want to work more on feedback, reach out to me. Here's my email. And I really appreciate your contributions to this. This is what we Haas community do for each other. We are here to learn for each other and help each other out. So have an awesome day. Oh, and a challenge for you. If you want to do a stretch goal for the next month, every day, plan and give one person feedback. So this is the way you could start small. Plan and give one person feedback. It could be tiny. You know, the barista, when you put the foam so high up on the cup, then I can't put the lid on and it spills in my car. Would you put less foam in next time or something like that? And then at the end of each day, give yourself feedback. What worked about that? Huh. Well, what's the upgrade? What do I want to do differently next time? And then schedule it. Oh yeah, the Cameron Anderson talk is really wonderful. I found it very useful information. You know, I work a lot with teams, and one of the challenges with teams is that a group of people will get into psychological dynamics of agreeing with each other. The strongest voices will pull, like a tide, will pull the other people, and you'll get less competent answers than you would if people thoroughly feel comfortable throwing all their ideas out there, or do their thinking and contributing ideas separately, not in the group. Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate that. Yeah, it is part of what I aspire to do, and I think is part of the Haas experiential learning is it's your learning. It's got to be engaging for you. Otherwise, why bother? And you are the ones, it's your learning. I'm not telling you you must do this. I want you to find a path or a tool to optimize your own game and your performance. Great. All right, you guys. Oh, yes. So you got the Cameron reference. And, you know, there's other things I referenced in this talk lightly that haven't been put here. One is, oh, yeah, I can type it here, can't I? Look at that. I could send it in follow-up email. Difficult when you want more language and formats around how do I really deal with that tough thing. Difficult conversations and crucial conversations are two classic books that talk about in intimate detail that one-to-one conversation and where it can go south and how you can make it great. So those are two wonderful resources that are on my bookshelf that I refer to. All right, you guys, this has been super fun. Stay in touch. And if you have more questions, feel free to email me. All righty. Go Bears!